Good morning again. Once we have made a decision about our ethical framework and who we are as a human being, the second question we have to ask is, how do I take this into action? How do I begin to think about taking my values and moving those values into action? So in this section of our conversation together, we will be looking at how we make decisions. We begin with the notion and remembering that as we begin to think about life, we often do not get clear-cut yes, no, right, wrong answers. While our gut may give us some information, while we may have an initial reaction, we quickly learn that all of our decisions depend on the context in which we find ourselves. And so it is important for us to slow down, pay attention, take a look at what is going on in our environment so that we can in fact make a better decision. Now, the question that I get asked a whole lot is, can we really learn to choose wisely? And the answer is yes, if we are willing to be careful and thoughtful about what we do. So let me give you some hints about how you can do that. We have 3 steps that become important. The first is using a decision model, a 5-step process we're going to begin going through in just a few minutes. The next step then is to lay on top of that decision model the 4 ethical lenses. Remember, each one of the 4 ethical lenses has a different focus, a different part of our experience together that becomes the focal point for the decision. And then we lay it within the context of a typical business problem, a process, ethical values, and then a problem that we have to resolve. As we began, we talked about these four conversations. How does the individual fit into the community, and how do we balance our head and our heart? And as we went through this, we realized that each one of these points has a different point of emphasis, a different place that it lays out into our business communities together. As we think about autonomy, we want individuals to choose best how they're going to live. What kind of jobs do they want? As we begin to work in a team together, we care about keeping our individual privileges, our individual flexibility, our individual gifts and talents, while we find meaning and purpose in the work. Individual organizations get to choose how they want to be in the community. But what do they want to provide? What is their product mix going to look like? What are their strategies? How do they live into their founders' values? And then others who are going to be buying our products and interacting with us as customers want to have sufficient information to make good choices. And so the core value of autonomy has to be recognized and understood within a business context. We then move into the core value of community. We want to be able to share the benefits and burdens of the organization. As we are working together, each of us has to do our part. One of my very favorite commercials is about a guy going into the refrigerator, taking a look at perhaps taking out his colleague's lunch. And there was an exercise that was done where people put a picture of eyes on the refrigerator. And what they found is that people stopped stealing each other's lunch to the tune of about 30% less because they believed they were being watched. This is the sharing of the burdens and benefits. As we're part of a team, we want to balance the workload. We want to make sure people are safe. We want to make sure salaries are fair. All of these parts to make sure that we are in a community together. Organizations care about having an even, level playing field. How do we make sure that everybody is playing by the same rules so that everybody has a fair shot at getting a contract or making a difference in our communities? And then as each of us are customers or consumers or employees, we want to be treated fairly by the various parts of the community. And so you can see how the values of the shareholders may in fact be in tension with the values of the individuals. And ethics teaches us how to balance these sets of priorities. As we then move into the next set of tensions, our head, we want to make sure that we are being rational, not immobile. Now, the little green guy to the left of your screen has a disease where he is not able to move in the least except for his eyes. And one of the problems we have sometimes with organizations is we have so many rules and so many procedures that the organization can't move. As we again are dealing with this pandemic of coronavirus, we're able to see how long it takes organizations to shift in order to deal with a new reality where we're trying to keep each other safe. So individuals want to be able to follow the rules and the obligations of the profession. They want to be able to advocate for change. Those who are in the management positions want to be able to articulate their policies carefully. One of the values of going through this process is that you will learn why you're doing the processes, why the rules are in place. Organizations want to support healthy economic systems. The conversations that we're having currently about being a B corporation, or the corporate roundtable discussion or proclamation that was signed last summer, is all about making sure our economic system is as healthy as possible. And then our stakeholders, those who are impacted by our decisions, want to make sure they have good information. Moving then into the conversation about sensibility, there are times when each of us need to know when mercy is more important than justice. When do we have to not follow the rules exactly? When do we have to suspend the rules because it's what's going to be, in fact, important to this individual? How can we support flexibility? What do we have, as some people need a very structured environment, others need an open environment? How do we begin to deal, as we're seeing with education, when all of a sudden we need to move to an online setting instead of face-to-face? How can we be flexible, and how can we meet those needs? How can we respond to changing social needs? And so again, we are all living through an experiment in flexibility as we are scrambling to meet the needs of minimizing the opportunity for the disease to perpetuate itself and to spread through our community. At the same time, the requirements of the community are met. And in this process of flexibility, we are aware of our own needs, our own desires, as well as those who are impacted. And so again, we see the tension between the head, the heart, the individual, and the community played out in these 4 different ethical lenses. Now, as we work together, we're going to go through 5 different steps. And each of these steps requires that you use the information from your ethical lens inventory and your information about the 4 primary ethical theories in the resolution of the decision. We begin by paying attention. We frame the ethical issue. Many times we don't separate facts from assumption. We get case studies and we get dilemmas that we have to answer. But we have tons of information that we don't know. So if we're using the coronavirus as our case study for today, none of us know exactly how it's transmitted. None of us know exactly how fast it will go. None of us know exactly the best treatment or the best way to test. We would love to know all this information, and yet we have to make a decision based on what we know. As we look at our assumptions, we look at history, we look at other people's experiences, we look at our previous experience as we make inferences about what is it that we should be doing. The biases and the prejudices are very interesting. I'm in the demographic of people who are supposed to be staying home, but I'm at my office today. And my bias was, well, we only have 5 of us in this office. We are all in our separate spaces. I'm really very healthy anyway, and so I may not need to heed the warnings that are out there. And so I find myself using my biases and my prejudices to inform against the facts that may be coming forward about this particular virus that is going throughout the nation. As I begin to take a look at the coronavirus, I can then take a look at the values intention. My head says that I need to pay attention to history. I need to listen to the experts. I need to figure out what they're saying. My heart says I really want some flexibility. I need to be able to go to work. I want to go out and have a drink with my friends. How do I balance between those 2 tensions as I make a decision about how to respond to this emergency within our community? Individual versus the community. I've had many conversations over the past 4 days about canceling meetings, about stopping travel. I was supposed to take 4 trips in the next 4 weeks, and I'm taking none. I read this morning a blog from a colleague who found himself minimizing the risk in order to not disrupt his life. And he said that when companies take a look at risk and risk sharing, the closer they get to a decision point, the less likely they are to look carefully at the decision that has to be made. And so as we begin to take a look at our own role within this ethical dilemma of how we are to respond to and be with this tension in our community, looking at our head and our heart and how we fit within the community is really important. Rumor has it that many in the MSU community have to decide whether or not they're going to do St. Patty's Day tomorrow, which is a major event for your community, versus pay attention to being safe and not going in. I'll be interested to see what you all choose. The next place we go is being intelligent, identifying our ethical boundaries. As we look at the 4 ways we make decisions, we realize that each one of them has a set of questions that get asked that help us work through this particular tension. So the responsibilities lens: what agreements must I keep? What are my rights and responsibilities, and why am I acting? Our intentions become very important. If I am choosing to go out to the grocery store or out in order to get medicine for myself, for my spouse, to get groceries, my reason is not to deliberately infect anybody else. My responsibilities are to be able to be as thoughtful about how I interact with others, how I engage in safe practices. And my agreements with you and others is to make sure that I do my part in making sure that the community and the businesses and all the places that we interact with are in fact safe. What consequences can I tolerate? What will make me happy? Well, clearly, not getting sick and not having people I love not get sick will make me happy. Am I willing to tolerate the consequences of inconvenience? I read a piece across my Facebook feed that said, "Your parents went off to war for our democracy. Are you willing to stay inside?" And I realized that the kinds of things you and I are being asked to do may not be that big, and yet they may be things that we feel are very, very difficult for us to do. What's a fair process? Whose voice needs to be heard? One of the conversations that we had in Colorado was about closing down our ski slopes. And one of the criticisms that was leveraged against us is that we didn't give anybody any notice. What's a fair process? How do we make sure that changes in policies are phased in appropriately? How do you care for people without power? These are the kinds of questions that get asked not just in an emergency situation, but every day when you're making the small decisions that you're making. And then what virtues are required, what behaviors are required. As we walk through these 4 sets of questions, as we begin to see and think about how our decision impacts each of these 4 lenses, we wind up with a more nuanced and more careful decision about what we do. What I know from doing these workshops for a very long time is that whatever ethical lens you're in, you will like the questions in that lens better than the other ones. So I live down the results lens, and I'm very used to thinking about what's going to make me happy and what consequences can I tolerate. I'm not as used to thinking across into what's a fair process or whose voice needs to be heard. And so I have to train myself to ask these questions in order to get to a better decision. Once I'm intelligent, once I've identified the ethical boundaries I have to live with, I now get to determine my ethical options for action. As I'm making this decision, I have to think about the core values of each lens. How can I be honest and do what's right, even if no one's watching? How can I be respectful, do good, and benefit others? How can I be fair and consider those without power? How can I act in integrity with the core virtues of my role with who I am as a human being? And these questions and thinking about this approach will help us come to a decision that is appropriate for the situation we're in. And then we act. We have paid attention to what's going on. We have thought about our ethical boundaries. We have thought about how to get to the very best action given the situation we have, and now we act with courage. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the fallout's going to be. We may have unintended consequences, but as we act, we are very careful to notice that we have done the very best we could in the situation we have. Now, this allows us to listen to each other carefully. As I listen to other people's values and commitments, I am able to act in a way that I can listen and reflect back to them what they're saying. I can respect myself. There's a body of research that says that leaders who go through the process that we've described and make a decision that's not popular are able to live with that decision because they know they have considered all of the different options carefully. In the actions we do, we want to aim for the highest expression of what's good and true. We want to harmonize the values that are in tension in the very best way in order to get to a good result. And then as we practice over and over again, making different decisions as we move forward, we will continue to develop our ethical skills and become more effective at what we do. Finally, we want to reflect. What happened? How did we feel? What did we notice about what we thought? What did we notice about how people responded to us? Did it turn out the way that we had expected, or did it turn out in a different way? As we begin to reflect, we can again look at the 4 lenses and make sure that we have thought about all of it. The responsibilities lens wants to treat people as fully functioning adults, able to make their own decisions, able to take a look at their own values. But in that process, we want to focus on ideals. What does it mean to be the very best expression of ourselves in this situation? The results lens people want to make sure that people are happy. A better way perhaps of thinking about this is that people are thriving, that they are able to live into their core values and commitments. But as we do this, we have to realize that we made choices and that we cannot then claim no responsibilities for the choices we made. In the relationship lens, we want to make sure that everybody's voice is heard. We want to make sure that all the constituents are at the table and that our processes have a purpose. And then finally, we want to seek excellence in everything that we do. As you begin to think about how to make a decision, whether it be the small decision about whether to party tomorrow night at St. Patty's Day, a larger decision about how to interact with your classes and your professors as you are going to online teaching and you have a complete semester disrupted, or how to engage in the larger questions about how to live your life and what it is you want to do. Seek excellence in everything that you do. As you interact with yourself and others, know what you want to do. Know the actions you want to take. Think about what is important for you to acquire, your title, your degree, your education, the stuff. But more importantly, think about who you are, what you want to be as a human being. As you begin to think and create your ethical self, what do you want that self to be? How do you want to be in the world? And as you answer these questions and reflect on them, every decision you make, every tiny act you make towards an ethical purpose, towards your ethical self, will reinforce and strengthen how you are in the world. Thank you for spending this time together. Thank you for reflecting with me on these core questions. And I look forward to feedback and to any questions that you might have as you begin to think about how to apply this into your life. And as I told your professors, if you have any questions of me, feel free to reach out to me personally, and I'll be more than glad to answer those questions and continue the conversation about how you and I can make effective decisions in this world as we're facing very uncertain times. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day.